This is the story of a little girl's disappearance. Some facts from this case may shock you. Helena, Montana sits nestled in the heart of Big Sky country. For decades, this quiet mountain town thrived on mining. Silver and tin drawn from the earth sustained generations of hard-working families. The community was tight-knit, built around the mines that provided steady work and honest wages. Helena's natural beauty is breathtaking. Dense forests blanket the surrounding hills. Crystal clear streams wind through valleys, and the Montana wilderness stretches endlessly in every direction. It was this peaceful setting that drew the Marshall family from sunny California in the early 1980s. Nancy Faye Marshall, a waitress, and Kim Marshall, who was studying radio technology at the time, brought their blended family to Montana, seeking a fresh start. In 1983, between the two of them, they had 3 children under one roof. The oldest was Nathan, 6 years old. The middle child was Naylene, age 4. Both were Nancy's children from her previous marriage. The youngest was 2-year-old Noreen, Nancy, and Kim's daughter together. The Marshalls were a close, loving family. When Kim married Nancy after her divorce from her first husband, he didn't just gain a wife. He gained 2 stepchildren whom he loved as his own. He was so committed to being their father that he gave Nathan and Naylene his last name, making them true Marshalls in every sense. Today, we're focusing on the middle child, Naylene K. Briscoe, born September 8, 1978, in Orange County, California, the same region where her mother Nancy had grown up. Shortly after Naylene's birth, Nancy separated from the biological father of both Naylene and her older brother Nathan, eventually meeting Kim Marshall, who would become the only father figure the children would really know. Nancy and Kim were devout Mormons, and their faith formed the cornerstone of their family life. The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wasn't just their religion. It was their community, their moral compass, and their source of strength as they built their new life in Montana. But this story of family, faith, and fresh starts in Big Sky country would soon take a devastating turn that would haunt Helena forever. Little is known about Kim Marshall beyond his passion for electronics and radio technology. His hobby had become an all-consuming pursuit, so much so that he wasn't working a traditional job. This meant Nancy, despite her modest waitress wages, was the sole breadwinner supporting their family of 5. It was a financial strain, but they made it work through careful budgeting and Nancy's tireless dedication. The Marshalls were an outdoorsy family who regularly went hiking and camping. Living so close to Montana's wilderness, they made sure their children were wood-smart from an early age. The kids knew basic wilderness survival skills, how to find water, identify dangerous plants, and most importantly, what to do if they ever got separated from the group. These weren't just casual conversations. In Montana, teaching your children wilderness safety could be a matter of life and death. Their backyard playground was essentially Yellowstone National Park, with its active geothermal features and vast untamed forests stretching for hundreds of miles. The Marshall children were more comfortable in the woods than most kids were on a playground. In June 1983, Kim's local ham radio club organized a family picnic. Entire families were invited, giving the kids a chance to run free in nature while parents could relax and socialize with fellow radio enthusiasts. That morning, 4-year-old Naylene chose her favorite outfit, a bright yellow t-shirt paired with matching yellow shorts. The whole family, Naylene, Nathan, baby Noreen, Nancy, and Kim, piled into their car and headed south toward the wilderness area outside Helena. It was a gorgeous Montana summer day, with clear blue skies and temperatures perfect for outdoor fun. Around 4 p.m., as the afternoon heat reached its peak, a group of children approached their parents with a request. Could they walk down to the small creek nearby to cool off and splash around? The stream was only a short walk from the picnic area, clearly visible through the trees. The creek seemed just right there. It was actually the gateway to some of the most rugged wilderness in North America. The very beginning, 4-year-old Naylene, despite being an experienced little hiker for her age, began falling behind the group. Little Naylene climbed up, folded her little legs beneath her, and decided to wait for the others to come back. When one of the girls from the group returned to check on Naylene roughly 15 minutes later, she found only an empty boulder. "Naylene!" the older child called out, her voice echoing off the surrounding rocks. "Naylene, where are you?" But Naylene Marshall had vanished without a trace. They'd searched everywhere they could think of, but there was no sign of the little girl in the bright yellow clothes. At first, the adults assumed this was a simple case of a lost child, something that happened from time to time in Montana's wilderness. 4-year-old Naylene knew basic wood safety, and surely she couldn't have gone far. They figured she'd gotten confused about which direction the group had gone and wandered off the trail looking for them. But Naylene was barefoot when she disappeared. On one hand, walking barefoot through the rocky Montana forest would be painful and slow her down considerably. A small child couldn't get very far over rough terrain without shoes. On the other hand, those same rocks and fallen branches could easily cause a serious injury. What if she'd cut her foot and was somewhere hurt and unable to call for help? The families immediately organized their own search, combing through the forest around the boulder where Naylene was last seen. They called her name until their voices were hoarse, checked every hiding spot a scared 4-year-old might choose, and followed every possible path she could have taken. But after hours of searching with no trace of the little girl, Nancy and Kim Marshall made the call that would transform their family outing into a major criminal investigation. They called the Lewis and Clark County Sheriff's Office. Within an hour, sheriff's deputies, Forest Service rangers, and search and rescue volunteers converged on the area with a level of organization that impressed even experienced outdoorsmen. The response was massive. Nearly 2,800 volunteers joined the official search effort. This wasn't just professional searchers, this was a community rallying around one of their own. Members of the Marshall family's LDS congregation dropped everything to help. Neighbors who'd never met the family showed up with hiking boots and flashlights. Local businesses donated food and supplies for the searchers. The mood among the volunteers was determined and optimistic. Everyone believed they were looking for a scared, tired little girl who would soon be found safe in her mother's arms. Maybe she'd fallen asleep under a tree or gotten turned around and was wandering in circles waiting to be rescued. One of the first specialized resources to arrive was Duke, an experienced search and rescue bloodhound with an impressive track record. Duke had successfully located numerous missing persons throughout Montana's wilderness, both children and adults who'd gotten lost in the vast forests. The dog handlers gave Duke one of Nayleen's items to establish her scent, and the bloodhound immediately went to work. At first, everything looked promising. Duke confidently picked up Nayleen's trail from the boulder where she'd been resting and began following it through the forest. But then something strange happened. After tracking steadily for a short distance, Duke suddenly stopped, circled around confused, and lost the scent completely. The trail simply vanished. Experienced search and rescue teams knew what this usually meant. The missing person had been picked up, either by someone who carried them or by a vehicle. Authorities quickly escalated their efforts, deploying a helicopter equipped with thermal imaging cameras and bringing in 4 additional search dogs. But Mother Nature had other plans. On the second day of searching, rain began falling across the Montana wilderness, washing away any remaining physical evidence and making the search exponentially more difficult. For the first 10 days, investigators treated this as a lost child case. But when they finally conducted detailed interviews with the children who'd been at the creek, 2 8-year-old girls revealed something chilling. They remembered seeing a man in a purple jogging suit near the creek that day. More importantly, they'd witnessed him talking to Nayleen. The little girl had even said something to him about her brother being a fast runner. Most disturbing of all, the man had been trying to get Nayleen to play a game he called shadow tag, a game none of the other children had ever heard of. Suddenly, this was no longer a case about a lost child. This was an abduction. Soon, Nayleen's smiling face was everywhere, on highway billboards, milk cartons, grocery bags, and missing child flyers posted in store windows across the country. Her bright smile reached beyond Montana to families nationwide. But as Helena tried to return to normal life, the Marshall family remained trapped in an agonizing limbo. Months turned to years. By the time little Noreen turned 4, the same age Nayleen had been when she vanished, there was still no trace of the missing girl. To cope with their devastating loss, Nancy and Kim channeled their grief into action. They founded a non-profit organization dedicated to training search and rescue dogs, recognizing that not all police dogs were equipped for wilderness tracking. Their work not only provided them with purpose during their darkest hours, but also helped locate other missing persons across Montana. Meanwhile, investigators brought in a hypnotherapist to work with the child witnesses, hoping to recover additional details about the man in the purple jogging suit. Sketches were drawn up, but it did not bring any results. And then, in 1985, the phone rang in the center that was searching for missing children. The operator picked up the phone. "I have Nealon," a man's voice said. "The girl is alive and well." The man suddenly hung up the phone. The man was calling from a payphone, not from his home number. 2 months later, an envelope with no return address arrived at the sheriff's office. Inside was a typewritten letter, clearly typed on a machine to conceal the author's handwriting. "I picked her up on the road near Elkhorn Park between Helena and Boulder. She was crying and scared. I took her in my arms and she was shaking all over. I decided I would keep her and love her as my own. I brought her home with me. I have good investment income and can work from home, so I spend all my time with her. I teach her, and she enjoys traveling with me on trips. Her hair is now short and curly. She has grown. She's about 3 feet 9 inches tall and weighs around 50 pounds. All 4 of her upper front teeth have come in, plus 2 bottom ones. She bathes and brushes her teeth every day. She eats well. Her favorite foods are pizza and cherry Coke. She would be happy to tell you about our trips to San Francisco, New York, Oklahoma City, New Orleans, Nashville, Chicago, Puerto Rico, and Canada. We even spent a month in Britain last year, and she loved it. Our passports raised no questions. The first letter was followed by several more. Police received reports of a girl matching Nylene's description at a restaurant in Janesville, Wisconsin, but officers couldn't act on the sighting. Finding the person who had written about keeping Nylene seemed equally impossible. In 1990, the popular TV show Unsolved Mysteries featured Nylene's case. The show asked viewers to call with any information, even anonymously. Soon after, students from a Washington state school called in. They believed their classmate was the missing girl. She matched Nylene's description perfectly. Excited police rushed to investigate. They spoke with classmates and teachers, contacted the girl's father, and discovered her documents were forged. This was indeed a kidnapped child, but not Nylene. The girl was Monica Bonilla, abducted by her own father 9 years earlier. Her mother had been searching desperately and was close to giving up hope. Monica was finally reunited with her family. So Nylene's story brought together a loving mother and daughter, even though Nylene herself was still nowhere to be found. Years passed, and in 1991, the Marshall family received what could only be described as bittersweet hope. In 1991, a man with a criminal record named Richard James Wilson walked into the police station and confessed to killing Nylene and another woman. He claimed he murdered the girl that same day and dumped her body in an abandoned mine shaft near the park where the family had been camping. Detectives were intrigued. Wilson had been convicted of child molestation and was on probation. More importantly, he had been living in Helena in 1983, when Nylene disappeared. Wilson agreed to lead police to the location. They excavated the 25-foot mine shaft but found no remains. After further investigation and finding no evidence linking Wilson to the crime, police released him. The false confession had given the Marshall family false hope, only to crush it once again. In 1994, the Marshall family moved to Japan for Kim's work assignment. The following year, they were set to relocate to Mexico. Nancy went ahead alone to find housing for the family. She was found hanged in a Mexican hotel room. Her death was ruled a homicide. The Marshall family now faced an unimaginable double tragedy, losing not only their beloved daughter and sister, but now their mother as well. In 1997, Nylene's case took an unexpected turn. A pregnant 19-year-old woman walked into a New Orleans hospital, far from Montana. She gave her name as Helena and said she remembered almost nothing about her past. No childhood illnesses, no family medical history. When asked about her parents, she said she believed her mother's name might be Nylene, an extremely rare name in the United States. Could this young woman be the missing girl now grown up? What were the odds that her mother was really named Nylene? Maybe she remembered the name from childhood, but what if it was actually her name? The young woman had introduced herself as Helena. Remember where Nylene's family lived? Helena, Montana. The connection seemed too strong to be coincidence. Even stranger, an unidentified man had accompanied the woman to the hospital. The mysterious pair disappeared before the baby was born. Police immediately launched a search. The woman's age matched what Nylene's would be now. They found her and obtained a blood sample for DNA testing, but there was a problem. Who could they compare it to? Kim wasn't Nyleen's biological father, and Nancy was dead. Investigators found a DNA sample Nancy had provided early in the investigation, but it had degraded due to poor storage conditions. The testing process took months. After an agonizing wait, the results came back. No match. The 19-year-old Helena was not Nyleen Marshall. In 2018, a strange development occurred. Several business owners in Wisconsin received anonymous letters postmarked from Cincinnati. Inside were age-progressed photos of Nyleen, images showing what she might look like as an adult. Who sent them? And why Wisconsin, where Nyleen had reportedly been spotted years earlier? Police were notified about the mysterious letters, but their sender remains unknown. This latest lead, like so many others, went nowhere. Today, Nyleen would be nearly 50 years old. Age-progressed images show what she might look like now. Perhaps your neighbor, a nurse at the local hospital, or a stranger on the bus, someone, somewhere, might recognize the little girl who vanished so long ago. Her case has gone cold, with no significant developments in years. The Marshall family deserves answers. Nyleen deserves justice. And somewhere out there, the truth is waiting to be discovered. That's the story, dear friends. Subscribe and please like it. Today I'm diving into the shocking case of Trenny Lynn Gibson. Make sure to hit subscribe and smash that like button if you want more true crime content. October 8th, 1976, started as just another rainy fall day in Knoxville, Tennessee. Despite the weather, Bearden High School's gardening club, including 16-year-old Trenny, had a field trip planned to the Great Smoky Mountains. The exact route was kept secret until the last minute due to weather conditions. Trenny was your typical small-town teenager with big dreams. She loved everything about plants and planned to study landscape design in college. She was also a talented artist who worked at a local cafe after school, saving money for her future. At home, she helped her mom Hope with cooking and looked after her little brother. Trenny had two brothers, older brother Bob, who was her best friend, and younger brother Miracle, plus a sister named Tina. Classmates described Trenny as quiet and independent. Not the popular crowd, but not an outcast either. She kept to herself mostly. The Gibson family were devout Baptists, conservative but loving. Friends who visited described their home as warm and welcoming. But that October morning would change everything forever. Given her religious upbringing, you might assume strict parenting. But honestly, the only rebellious thing about Trenny was occasional smoking. And even then, she'd only take a drag when friends offered her a cigarette. Pretty tame stuff. No other major rule breaking that anyone knew about. But let's get back to what happened that day. That morning, Trenny's mom, Hope, dropped her off at the school meetup point. As they pulled up, Trenny asked a passing classmate if the trip was still happening since it was starting to drizzle. He confirmed they were good to go. Trenny grabbed her lunch from the car but left her purse and textbooks behind. She'd only need the basics for a day hike. The day before, she'd actually asked her mom to come along, but Hope couldn't find a babysitter for her youngest son. After saying goodbye, Trenny joined her classmates boarding the bus to the Smokies. She walked to the back and sat next to Robert Simpson, a friend of her brother's, who was a bit older. Bob had specifically asked Robert to keep an eye on his sister since this was Trenny's first real hiking trip away from family. Once everyone was seated, teacher Wayne Dunlap announced their route. They'd hike up Andrews Bald Trail, then return the same way. They could observe different plants along the way, but absolutely no wandering off the trail or collecting samples. Good thing, too. Stepping off that tourist trail meant entering some seriously dangerous terrain. We're talking massive boulders, deep crevices, and sheer cliff faces everywhere. But the trail itself was considered completely safe, no obstacles, and even if you did wander off, the terrain would stop you from going far. After the briefing, the hike began. The students walked in small groups, one behind the other. Only one adult supervised the entire trip, their teacher, who stayed at the back to make sure no one got left behind. By today's standards, that setup sounds insane. One teacher supervising 40 teenagers in the wilderness. But back in the 70s, nobody batted an eye at those ratios. Same goes for the mystery route. These days, parents get detailed itineraries and have to sign permission slips for every field trip. But in 1976, kids often found out where they were going once they were already on the bus. Different times, looser rules. As they hiked up the trail, kids were being kids, talking loud, cracking jokes, pointing out cool plants they spotted. The Smokies were gorgeous, even with the miserable weather. Cold rain and wind made it pretty uncomfortable. During their lunch break, Robert noticed Trenny was underdressed, just jeans, a blouse, and a sweater. He gave her his jacket to stay warm. After lunch, Robert and Trenny reached the end of the trail at Andrew's Bald Summit and started heading back down together. That's Robert's version of events, according to his official police statement. On the way up, Trenny and I stopped to chat. She seemed in good spirits. When we reached the eating area near Andrew's Bald, we sat down for lunch. She didn't seem like she wanted to run off or anything. She even shared part of her sandwich with me. When I decided to keep going, I asked if she wanted to join me, and she said yes. We walked about a mile, then took a 5-minute break because she was breathing pretty heavily. When we finally reached the summit around 1:30 p.m., she was still in a good mood. We looked around. Then it started raining, so we took shelter under a tree. When the rest of the group caught up, Trenny seemed energized and ready to head back down. She asked if I was coming with them, but I wanted to stay at the summit a little longer. She said goodbye. That was the last time I saw her. When I got back to the bus, I noticed she wasn't there. Other kids noticed too. I asked the group she'd been with, and they had said they'd stopped to rest while she kept walking. Last they saw her, the trail split left, but Trenny went right. Here's where the story gets complicated. According to some accounts, during that lunch break, Robert confessed he had romantic feelings for Trenny. She reportedly didn't feel the same way. To her, he was just a friend. After that awkward conversation, they turned around and started heading back down the mountain. When the rain started, everyone took shelter under trees. Important detail: Robert and Trenny weren't hiking alone. Other student groups were ahead and behind them. This is where witness accounts start getting fuzzy. Robert apparently started descending with a different group, then stopped and decided to hang back. His reason? He wanted to track a bear. That's what he later told police and Trenny's family. Either way, Robert ended up far from the main student groups, and nobody saw him during this time. Meanwhile, Trenny was descending with other classmates. At some point, they stopped to rest, but she kept going alone. Witnesses said she was walking unusually fast, like she was in a hurry or had somewhere specific to go. Her classmates watched her for a while. One student later reported seeing Trenny suddenly stop, turn her head to the right like she'd spotted something, crouch down briefly, then quickly step off the trail into thick forest. The witness looked away for just a second to talk to friends. When she looked back, Trenny was gone. Her classmates started calling her name, scanning the dense woods where she'd disappeared. Most figured she'd taken a different trail and would meet them at the bus. But when everyone gathered at the parking lot, no Trenny. Robert showed up dirty and out of breath, acting surprised and irritated that she hadn't returned. He claimed he'd last seen her on the summit before going off to track that bear. Here's the thing. Nobody had seen Robert on the way down either. Teacher Wayne Dunlap immediately organized a search with several students, but found nothing. He sent the bus back to school and called park rangers for help. The official search began 30 minutes after Trenny failed to return. With heavy clouds and fog limiting visibility in those dense woods, finding anyone seemed nearly impossible. But there was no time to waste. Soon, Trenny's family was notified, and massive search operations began, both ground crews and helicopters. Searchers made some immediate discoveries. Right where Trenny had stepped off the trail, they found several beer cans and cigarette butts. But it wasn't clear if they were connected to her disappearance. Strangely, there's no record of whether these potential clues were ever properly investigated. The search conditions were brutal. Temperatures dropped to 30 degrees Fahrenheit by evening, with freezing rain making the rocky trail dangerously slippery. One rescue worker actually fell and broke several ribs. They brought in search dogs, multiple breeds with different handlers. And here's the weird part. Every single dog behaved exactly the same way. As soon as they picked up Trenny's scent, every dog led searchers to the nearest scenic overlook. Then they all headed toward the road and stopped dead in their tracks. It was like she'd vanished into thin air. Trenny's family tried everything. Hired private detectives, arranged for helicopter pilots and rescue teams, but park administration blocked them all, claiming too many searches would cause irreparable harm to nature. Imagine how her family felt being told that protecting plants was more important than finding their daughter. Winter came and went. New searches resumed in April 1977. They still didn't find Trenny, but they discovered her personal belongings in very suspicious places. Trenny always carried a special comb for long hair, a gift from her mother. Her sister Tina had an identical one. That comb turned up in Robert's car. Trenny's brother Bob found it there, and Robert was actually using it. When Bob examined it, he found Robert's hair caught between the teeth. Robert claimed Trenny had given him the comb for safekeeping during their hike. Nobody could confirm this story. Why didn't Robert mention having Trenny's comb immediately after she disappeared? Then there were her sapphire jewelry pieces, a star pendant and ring she'd been wearing the day she vanished. They turned up with some girl from a completely different class. This girl refused to explain how she got them. Even worse, she refused to return them to Trenny's family. The evidence was piling up, but none of it was leading to answers. These were Christmas and birthday gifts. Robert had an explanation for this, too. He claimed Trenny had given her jewelry to another girl to hold while she went to the bathroom. But the jewelry turned up with a completely different girl from another class. Strange, right? It's starting to look like someone from that hiking trip knew exactly what happened to Trenny Gibson. How else do you explain her personal belongings scattered among different students, none of whom could give a straight answer about how they got them? They also found a hand-drawn map that Trenny had made. It turned up with another student who wasn't even on the field trip that day. For some reason, he was immediately ruled out as a suspect. Were students at Bearden High covering something up? After a year with zero progress, her sister Tina started interviewing classmates herself. What she heard was terrifying. Students told her to mind her own business, or what happened to Trini might happen to her too. These weren't just brush-offs. They were direct threats. Years later, one unnamed student casually mentioned that Trini died within 30 minutes of disappearing. She said it dismissively like it was common knowledge. Another student even named a possible burial site, Mellinger Ridge.
Now we get to some intriguing theories about what really happened. Remember those cigarette butts and beer found where Trini disappeared? Turns out none of the students had brought beer on the trip. The can looked relatively fresh, not like it had been there long. The search dogs that tracked Trini's scent also found more cigarette butts of the same brand near the road where her trail went cold. This leads to the abduction theory. Someone kidnapped Trini, hid her near the scenic overlook in some kind of underground bunker, then brought her to the road and drove off after the other students had left. The gate to the overlook was open that day, so someone had definitely been there. With the heavy cloud cover and fog, spiriting someone away unnoticed would have been entirely possible. So who could have done this? There are several unofficial suspects. First suspect. In October 1975, a disturbing incident occurred. A student from Trini's school named Calvin Bowman, one of the few black students, broke into the Gibson home looking for Trini. Calvin lived about 2 miles away, had 7 siblings, and was known as the class clown. He'd actually been friends with Trini before this incident, and Trini was close with his sister Annette. That night, Calvin was drunk and yelling for Trini's brother Bob. When Trini's mother saw an intruder in their house, she grabbed a shotgun and shot Calvin in the leg. Even wounded, he attacked Trini, grabbing her and trying to drag her outside while making explicit threats about what he planned to do. Fortunately, they managed to subdue him, and he was sent to juvenile detention. Calvin was furious that his assault had failed and promised the Gibson family would pay for this. After serving his time, Calvin returned to school and began seriously bullying Trini. She was terrified of him and made sure never to be alone with him. Some students claimed they saw Bowman's car following their bus that day. Problem: Calvin didn't own a car, but some still insist they saw Calvin in a vehicle behind the bus, just not his own car. This gets murky because Calvin had an alibi. He was supposedly at school that day, confirmed by a teacher who also said no cars were following the bus. Here's where Calvin's alibi falls apart. Former students revealed that Bearden High's attendance system was basically worthless. If you showed up in the morning, you were marked present for the entire day. Students could easily leave campus unnoticed. So Calvin could have been at school in the morning, then driven to the Smokies to intercept the hiking group. The timing would have worked. But there are problems with the Calvin theory. If multiple witnesses saw a car following the bus, why did the teacher deny it? And how would Calvin know the exact hiking route when even the students didn't know until they were on the bus? The case against Calvin is built on motive and opportunity, but the physical evidence is thin, and he's not the only suspect. The second suspect was Robert. Beyond the suspicious bear tracking story, arriving breathless at the bus, and keeping Trini's comb, his behavior during the search was bizarre. While search teams were desperately looking for Trini, Robert showed up at the Gibson house, making strange comments to her sister. He claimed that if Calvin had kidnapped Trini, he'd kill her. Later, he said Trini had probably run off with some dirty hitchhiker. Even weirder, Robert appointed himself the family's spokesperson. He'd come to their house, answer calls from journalists and police, and give statements on behalf of the family. The Gibsons repeatedly asked him to stop. Why was he so invested in controlling the narrative? Here's a crucial detail. Robert's father was the district attorney in Knoxville. Having a powerful DA for a dad would be incredibly helpful if you found yourself under suspicion for murder. His father could coach him on how to answer questions, what to say during interrogations, which Robert managed to avoid after that initial statement. With that kind of legal expertise in the family, staying ahead of an investigation would be much easier. Without physical evidence or witnesses, even strong suspicions weren't enough to build a case. There's also a conspiracy theory that Robert and Calvin worked together. They weren't close friends, but they knew each other. Calvin had connections to Trenny's brother Bob. The Gibson family believes this theory. One person lured Trenny away while the other attacked. Even if Robert didn't directly participate, he definitely knows more than he's saying. The theory goes like this. Calvin wanted revenge for the home invasion incident. He promised Robert that if they caught Trenny together, Robert could have his way with her after Calvin got his payback. If Robert had romantic feelings that Trenny rejected, maybe he thought this sounded like a good deal. Two people could more easily abduct and dispose of someone than one acting alone. Plus, Trenny trusted Robert. He was her brother's best friend. She would never have seen it coming. Laura Rist supports this conspiracy theory as well. She's dedicated 17 years to investigating Trenny's case, compiling every piece of evidence into one comprehensive file. She's kept this case alive through her blog, fighting for justice for Trenny. The most likely scenario is that someone Trenny knew well called to her from the bushes. Someone she trusted enough to approach without suspicion. That person grabbed her, dragged her deeper into the forest, then transported her away by car. The wilderness setting makes this case seem like a nature-gone-wrong story, but the forest was probably just an unlucky witness to something much more sinister. After nearly 50 years, Trenny Lynn Gibson remains missing. Her family still doesn't have answers. The students who were there that day, many of whom acted suspiciously or made threats, have never faced serious investigation. Thank you for watching to the end. Subscribe and like if you are interested in this topic.